See this? This has been silently killing the potential of visual novels both as narrative experiences and as games, yet no one is talking about it. So, to understand, let's step back a bit. A couple of months ago, creator of the widely influential death game visual novel, Danganronpa, kind of quietly shook the scene by stating that, quote, "When it comes to story-driven adventure games, I honestly think novels are much higher quality reading material. After all, works written by famous authors are simply a more interesting read." End quote. It's kind of insane to hear because Kodaka is basically throwing under the bus the very medium which made him relevant to begin with. Now, he does know that, quote, "outstanding adventure games are the ones that use game mechanics in their favor," quote. And there is some truth to this. Visual novels by nature are an interactive medium, so it would follow that those with well-designed mechanics would stand out among the rank and file. But look at the latest visual novel Kodaka's worked on, the underlying Last Defense Academy. While there's still the essence of a visual novel in there, when you look at the way the game uses game mechanics in their favor, you see that they're really just supplanting a whole different style of gameplay to fill in the gaps. And the player base knows this, with many citing how they don't care about these game mechanics and just want to get back to the reading. After all, that's what attracts people to visual novels to begin with. Yet it's like creators would rather not lean into that. So, is gameplay bad for visual novels? Not necessarily. While some developers will want to strip a visual novel down to its bare minimum, obviously others will want to give players choice and lean on the strength of the medium. And as a developer, I've been finding myself in that same position. I've been wanting to work on a visual novel that mixes the thrill of death game media, like Kaiji or even Danganronpa, with a bit of a romance twist. A story where a man and a woman are forced to cohabitate and engage in various acts of romance, not out of a genuine desire, but to save their own lives. Can true love emerge under such duress? And at what point does one reach their breaking point? Now, given the turbulent situations I wanted to portray, I wanted the interpersonal struggles to be navigated by the player themselves, and to represent that, I had been thinking of what was the best way of replicating that in my game. I prototyped a lot of ideas. A lot, to the point that one of my ideas ended up being about Mario Kart and a dating simulator hybrid where the racing represented the act of flirting. Yeah, imagine getting blue shelled because your partner got jealous over someone she saw you hanging out with. Okay, never mind that. But really, by the time I got to that idea, it hit me. This is completely off base. Why did I try to veer away so far from what a VN staple is? It's like I could have gone for a traditional branching tree structure that more closely suited my premise. Well, see this? This has been silently killing the potential of visual novels both as narrative experiences and... Wait, I already said that. Look, these branching dialogue options, they reveal the other side of the coin and the root cause of why we see so many visual novels focusing so much on other types of gameplay. In essence, while a branching dialogue option system may seem the most true to the core of a visual novel, as it doesn't really disrupt the reading experience, it's also a fundamentally flawed way of adding interactivity to a VN, and that's the reason we've gotten so many gimmicky VNs. It's a symptom, but not the true cause. That's why I reinterpreted the classic branching dialogue system into something that I think has a lot more potential, something that is a lot more liberating in its execution. To understand why, we must look at how branching dialogue options violate two of the unspoken rules of game mechanics that are crucial to the enjoyment of any game: spontaneity and consistency. TM don't steal. One thing that you might have felt as you played any of these dialogue option games is that many times you'll see options for things that you didn't even realize you could do, or inversely, become puzzled at the omission of an option that would seem so obvious. Therein lies the lack of spontaneous decision making. After all, there's really two steps to making a decision. First comes formulating possibilities in your mind, and then choosing among those possibilities. Conversely, dialogue option games strip away that first step that is so crucial to making choices engaging for the player. In fact, it might be arguably the more important step in making a choice. It's like if you were playing Super Mario Bros. And at every turn you get an option on screen on what to do. Not only would secrets cease to be so, but the very act of jumping would be far less engrossing. You stop problem solving and instead make simple binary choices. This is why when we're working dialogue options, I had to make a system where the player is actively shaping their outcome and not being presented the very answers that they should have figured out. Logically, this led to the idea that the system should allow players to be able to respond at any point in dialogue, unlike typical VNs that are restricted to specified points in the story, and to also not list out all the choices to the player. This might seem like a radical rule to follow to the developer, since turn-based RPGs also lay out all the options in a similar text format. Yet there's a crucial difference, which brings us to the second rule: consistency. What determines what any given player choice leads to? In a dialogue option game, the outcomes are hard-coded and arbitrarily decided by the writer on a case-by-case basis. Compare that to a turn-based combat game. If you press the attack button, the outcomes can be as varied as they are numerous. It goes to show that your choices are not only based on information you can reasonably infer, unlike most VNs, but they interact in more complex ways with the rest of the game's sandbox, rewarding players immensely for understanding the systems at play. And this mechanical ebb and flow, so to speak, also leads to the spontaneity I mentioned prior, since turn-based games are about knowing when to use the same set of tools over different situations. As you can see, spontaneity and consistency build on each other. In contrast, why do you think guides for visual novels are so prevalent? Why do people rely on them so heavily to get the necessary endings? It's because the mechanics of dialogue options are not consistent. There's no one way of predicting the outcomes. To get into a bit of a tangent here, it's why the demon negotiation dialogue system in Shin Megami Tensei games is so unenjoyable in comparison to the combat. There's no consistency to the dialogue required to recruit demons, so rather than trying to understand the demons' personalities, players just brute force it, which is both hilarious in how it contradicts the reputations of the games as super hard, strategic JRPGs, and how it serves as a microcosm of the faults of the archetypal dialogue system we see in visual novels. Ultimately, this journey for a consistent game system led me to my response: the player-led vision I always wanted to fulfill but really couldn't put into words. For some context, in the story that I'm presenting, the protagonist wakes up to face a female lead who, after also having been abducted, distrusts the protagonist, naturally so. In your average visual novel, the game would prompt the user to select from a predefined set of choices to move the story forward. I'm designing it so that the players can look into the backlog of the conversation and use past topics as responses to the current dialogue. That way, they utilize past story details to forge their path through the story, and recurring plot ideas can be utilized in different scenarios to move the plot. It'd be veering away from the branching structure into a more modular event-based system, where each event can be triggered by utilizing the correct concept. Each dialogue block represents a set of concepts that may diverge the conversation. The beauty here is that concepts that are relevant throughout the story can be reutilized in different scenarios, giving the story a sense of thematic cohesion. Of course, the technical reality of this might seem impossible to maintain. After all, there's an exorbitant amount of lines in even the smallest of visual novels. Would each one need to represent a different concept? And with as many concepts as any given story could have, wouldn't the quantity be untenable to manage? Not at all. Concepts can be repeated amongst conversations, thus the scope of what responses can be given is controlled from the get-go. More importantly though, all concepts will have base concepts, so to speak, that describe them in more general terms. This helps because rather than always needing to look for a very specific concept to get a specific reaction, you have a wider range of answers that may be eligible. There's more to this system that I'm slowly working on, but hopefully this is giving you a nice sneak peek into how I'm handling things. Of course, I'm sure there are still pending questions regardless, like how will the system account for the larger scope of full release? How will characters react to being responded to at different points of their speech? How will failure states work? And why did my game dev channel start out with a video reviewing a controller for its gyroscope abilities? These and many other questions will be answered in due time as I get to fulfill my aspirations of a high-stake romance visual novel, which I will be referring to as Project Confinement from now on. Next devlog, I will go into more detail about the story and the writing process, so if you made it this far, I must sincerely thank you for your time. Take care.